We are live. This is the market update. I am your host, Bill Noble. Is it crypto winter or are governments going insane? We have a frozen market, really, believe it or not, in bonds. I think one of the reasons why, perhaps crypto doesn't know what to do is because the bond market has literally locked itself up. In other words, nobody can borrow money and treasury bonds don't trade particularly well. And it is very possible that, the orange man went, frankly, way too far on the whole tariff thing, scaring the Chinese, making it frightful about their currency. In other words, I've talked on this show about a currency collapse over there. That could still happen. And then I think even if you don't understand that, you don't have to. What you can understand is that this thing with Powell is literally a complete mess. It speaks to how interest rates in the country get set. And at the end of the day, I think Powell should just quit, right? He should just quietly go off, let this latest storm go, and then just walk away, right? Because, he was here for the whole inflation debacle. That was, 80% his fault, right? Because he let the economy get way too overheated before he started raising rates. And then when he raised rates, it was a panic. And that created other problems. So make no mistake about it. Powell has screwed up. Powell should go. Now, having the orange man screaming, I'm going to fire him, he's an idiot, that is not helping the credibility of our bond market. And I think at this point, what happens to crypto is a function of what happens to the bond market. Coinbase wrote an article saying it's crypto winter, and now everyone's losing their mind about that. I think in many ways, just to editorialize, especially in altcoins, it's probably been winter, right, since, the second week of January, right? It's like Coinbase is like, you're standing outside in the middle of a snowstorm in a t-shirt and you've been there for 4 months. And then somebody comes up to you and says, man, it's winter, right? Everyone's P&L shows that, speculative assets have gotten trashed. But that doesn't mean that the second they stop this thing with the tariffs, which they're going to have to do, I think there's going to be across the board capitulation. I mean, the Chinese cannot afford to have their currency market blow up, and we cannot afford to have our bond market blow up. We just can't. So something gives there eventually. Frankly, at this point, the sooner the better, right? Because I think at the end of the day, all that's really happened is that we've demonstrated to the Chinese that we can hurt them as much as they can hurt us, them as in selling treasury bonds and the like. All right, let's welcome who's here. We'll go through the crypto news, and then we'll get you on your way for hopefully a happy Easter. Today is Good Friday, is a solemn Western holiday. So, again, if you're in crypto, this is true in general, but it always is a good idea to reach out to the higher power of your understanding. Enko, okay, MJ, Jav, Kyle, Vanessa, Brandon, Zapatis, good morning, welcome. Metal Synthetic, Taz Pinball, right? No crypto winter in Florida. Ragak, good afternoon and happy Easter from Austria, our friends in Europe. Welcome. Warmon, Malik, Horace, Tooth, ski season is coming. Jacob, good morning. All right, let's get into the news. Let's get into your holiday news. Okay, manufacturing jobs were already coming back home. And this is a good point, right? Any CEO that saw the orange man start to take the lead in say November of last year, or maybe even before that, would start bringing things back home. Now it's either that's because it's cost effective to do it, or because it's just a good strategic idea, right? In other words, I think a lot of Asian car makers, were already coming back home. Hyundai was one of the first players to do it. It just makes political sense to not have a target on your back for 4 years. And people like, I saw the tweet yesterday. People like these luxury good makers like Fendi and Louis Vuitton and Gucci, and they send you these things that say made in Italy, and they're actually shipped from China to Italy and then shipped from Italy to China. Things about $118 yoga pants, which I usually buy for my kid because she's a dancer, right? They make them in China for $5. Wow. Okay, so guys who are bringing jobs back home anyway, I think, because I think the political writing has been on the wall for some time. Now, let's talk about something a lot more serious. I couldn't find the tweet, but I know it's happening in Japan as well. The liquidity in the system is breaking down day by day. Okay. Junk bonds, one deal since April, meaning high-risk companies being able to get financing. Loans, no deals, record streak. Banks will not lend money. Banks, 2 deals that got hung up this week. Sometimes the music just stops. Okay. So while everyone in crypto is running around with this Bitcoin versus M2 chart, I would suggest a different approach, right? And I've had a suspicion about the M2 chart for a while because most of the global money supply growth is coming out of China in terms of panic printing, and that doesn't necessarily wind up in Bitcoin. Now, what could wind up in Bitcoin is money if people can't get funds out of China because they institute capital flows or capital controls, which is a function of, that's what happens when you get like a currency crisis. Okay. So everyone's like, well, they're going to print anytime soon. Well, yeah, they are going to have to print to stop this. But at the moment, the bond markets are frozen. I mean, in Japan, local governments cannot issue bonds. Local governments have had bond auctions fail because I guess the Bank of Japan didn't buy them, because the Bank of Japan buys all bonds and all stocks. It's like literally they printed so much money over there. They literally own everything. Seriously. And, there was no buyer for Japanese bonds because global bond markets are having serious problems. They're reflecting the fact that there's huge amounts of debt. Now, again, this should be amazing for Bitcoin and crypto. And our definition of amazing is getting a research report from Coinbase that it's winter and scaring everybody. When in reality, what should be scaring everybody is this, right? Simultaneously, you've got this thing between the president, the Treasury, and the Fed, which I can tell you right now, for anybody who's been in markets for a long time, there's some major cringe going on there. Major cringe about getting rid of Powell. We'll discuss that, I believe, right now. So if I want him out, he'll be out real fast. Orange Man says Powell playing politics over rate cuts. Okay. So when it comes to rate cuts, Powell, as usual, is too late, right? He's too late. This could have been done probably 2 months ago. Probably could have happened in January, right? Just kind of like right out of the gate. Now, if Powell cuts rates, it may be seen as a sign of weakness by the bond market. It may be seen as an acknowledgement that there's some kind of catastrophic problem. And the only reason he's cutting rates is to make the president happy. So this is a credibility and optics game right now. Now, what you may have already noticed is that the bond market sets the rate for your car loan. That's the interest rate that comes from the 5-year note. And the bond market sets the rate for the 30-year mortgage that comes from the 30-year long bond, right? So these rates that you pay, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They come from the bond market. Now, the Federal Reserve, when it changes interest rates, all it does is change the overnight lending rate between banks. Now, usually, if the Fed wants rates down, the rest of the bond market cooperates, but it most certainly does not have to. And this has happened before in other countries, where if you have a high debt burden and you have a lack of confidence in a bond market, and then the central bank makes some kind of panic interest rate cut to try to make it better, it actually makes it worse. It actually makes it worse. If it looks like they're acting, either they're panicking or they're acting politically. Okay. So with that said, Powell is sticking to this whole line about tariffs and dot plots and tariffs creating inflation. Okay. So the Fed couldn't stop the price of eggs from going up with Fed funds at 5%. Okay. They couldn't stop any of this stuff that happened on the food front. They're not going to stop inflation that's happening with tariffs. And the argument to cut rates is that people are suffering and housing is going to crash if they don't do something, right? That's what they should be talking about. That's what they should have been talking about a while ago. I mean, Robert Kennedy ran on a platform that because BlackRock has bought all the single family homes in the United States and the fact that interest rates are too high, nobody can afford to buy a house. So if he had taken that angle, he could have cut rates and it would have been believable. Now you've got a housing market locked up. You've got the orange man screaming like here. And then you have Powell organically having to resist. And a lot of people in the bond market, in a way, actually cheering for Powell. Because if Powell was perceived as doing politically motivated rate cuts, getting fired, which would be the worst thing in the world, or quitting would be okay. But, if Powell actually got fired and there was a constitutional spat as to whether or not the orange man could actually do it, that's banana republic stuff. That could send our bonds cascading lower and interest rates higher. Okay. Now, that is also the reason why I think crypto is frozen in its tracks, because this has created an element of fear in bonds. And when this goes away, crypto can go back to business. So I don't think it's crypto winter. I think it's liquidity winter. And of course, if you're long memes, you already know it's AI agent winter. I mean, it is, except for Fartcoin, which probably is being manipulated by people who have to sell it. Now, what's the resolution to the Powell thing? The resolution to the Powell thing is that they're going to appoint some sort of like associate. They're going to appoint like a Fed vice president or special consultant, and he'll be the one who's out on TV. So they'll put someone inside the Fed. So you'll have Powell and anti-Powell, like you have matter and antimatter. They'll put someone in there who will just do all the talking in the media and basically shame Powell into quitting. That's probably what's going to happen, which again is a little bit scary. All right. So this guy Bassett now has a problem, right? Literally, he's like, he's got to maintain, like he's involved with tariffs. I don't know why he is, but he is, right? He's got the orange man on Twitter every morning, just keeping everybody off balance. And then he's got to maintain faith in our bond market, which right now, the bond market in general is frozen. Now, as I just said, U.S. Treasury Secretary has cautioned the White House on attempts to fire Powell. Okay. If they make a circus out of this, you're going to have a problem in capital markets. You are, right? Powell's got leverage here in the sense that, right at politics to a certain degree, right? Just simple and plain deep state pushback against everything that Trump wanted, because there were articles last year that the Fed is not an apolitical organization. It's not, right? These guys have views. Yellen came from the Treasury. These guys have political views. So if the orange man wants rate cuts, they're not getting them. They're not getting them at all, especially even if inflation goes to zero, which if equities stay down and housing continues to roll over, you're going to have negative inflation in 6 months. Okay. All right. Powell's speech shows he's guessing again. Okay. Jerome Powell doubled down on his tariff apocalypse thing, warning that Trump's tariff levies could spark higher inflation and slower growth. Okay. They haven't actually collected a lot of money from tariffs. They haven't collected the money. They didn't save the money that they claimed they were going to save from Doge, and they haven't collected the money they said they were going to save from tariffs. So I don't know why everyone is upset, why Powell is freaking out about this. It hasn't happened yet. It's happened on Twitter and the news media, but it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so the Fed chairman says, yeah, we'd love to have crypto. We'd love to have a stable coin. We'd love to have a stealth CBDC. Every time I see this, this was like Gensler was like, oh, yeah, Bitcoin's fine. Or, oh, yeah, we're okay with stable coins. Yeah, okay. Stable coins help buy treasuries. They help act as a demand for our bonds, assuming we're smart enough to figure out that, our bonds are actually safe. Fed Chairman Powell says tariffs may have a larger and more persistent impact, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Don't do any more speeches, Jerome. Don't do any more speeches. Go take a really long vacation. Like they have this meeting in May. I mean, I don't think he has a choice but to dig in and say nothing and do nothing. And I've talked about this, right? Just basically say, you know what? I'm leaving everything where it is and let the orange man scream. Now, what isn't helping Powell is that the ECB just continues to cut rates because this decision over, inflation just like devastated their economy, right? It absolutely devastated it. So, I mean, they've actually, I think, been in a recession-ish environment for a while, right? And they just continue to cut and cut and cut and cut. Okay. They were smart. They did it gradually and early, right? We, on the other hand, were like, oh, wait, we got to tighten massively. Oh, we tightened too much. They were very orderly in how they did their rate cuts, which again makes the orange man even more upset. Now, moving on from that, these guys should be focused on housing. If you have a problem in the bond market, even if you don't have a problem in the bond market, right? Even if you don't have a problem in the bond market, all right, you have housing about to fall out of bed. Fall out of bed, right? Austin, Texas predicted to drop 4%. Zillow is now forecasting home values to drop in every large U.S. metro area over the next year. In some of these numbers, these forecasts, you can just put a 1 in front of every number, right? So instead of 1.3%, it could be like 11%. You have a seizure in the bond market and you have a sustained decrease in housing prices with the slow grinding, like unemployment situation coming up, forget about it. Who is going to be like the only people who will be able to buy houses is BlackRock. There won't be a bid for housing at all, right? People will not be able to buy a house. And again, I'm pretty sure this is not what people voted for. This is the tariffs. This is not, that stuff's not, this is the problem. This is the problem. Okay. Average Social Security recipient gets $1,200 a month. Average illegal refugee or whatever you want to call them gets close to $4,000. Okay. Just as a reminder, our sovereigns acting in your interest. See, when these guys say crypto winter, It just means everything is not mooning at this time. One thing I remember about crypto winter back in, say, like 2018, 2019, is that there was really no case to own crypto. There was no reason to own it or buy it. It was just like they pumped it, they dumped it. They did the ICO season in 2018. Again, they pumped it, they dumped it, right? There was no reason to buy it, right? And then, like some liquidity came along with the orange man, and then it was cough, cold, and flu. Cough, cold, and flu, central banks printed $14 trillion in 1 month. Central banks had printed like something like 10 trillion since 2008 over the last 12 years. And then in March of 2020, they printed 14 trillion, which levitated everything. Okay. So there was a reason, NFTs, layer ones, some of the tech stuff came along. Most of it was liquidity. Okay. And of course, that was all the way up and then all the way back down on FTX. But even after FTX, there was a case to buy crypto because of the Bitcoin ETF, right? Because, that was going to ignite the whole system. Big players were acknowledging that these things mattered, and the market took off. Now, everyone wants to talk about crypto winter when sovereigns are not acting in your interest at heart. You have a complete circus in just about every government. You have a Chinese currency crisis, a U.S. bond market crisis. You have artificial intelligence and that whole narrative, which has not been traded anywhere in crypto. And then there's this whole privacy thing where either you're going to want to keep your money from sovereigns or from machines. There's a case for crypto. There was no case in 2018. There was a rebellious McAfee. Yeah, we want crypto to rebel against the man. Sure. That's always been there, right? It's, Bitcoin as an alternative form of money, the Bitcoin standard, but that doesn't move the market. That doesn't move the market, right? The market's got to move on liquidity and themes, right? We're going to have liquidity because the bond market's frozen and we have themes. So I would disagree on this whole winter thing. What I would agree is that we cannot have a seized up bond market for an indefinite period of time. Because if people can't do things like do basic lending or basic bond issuance, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. Okay. So the Chinese have a ton of crypto. I think if there's a risk to the crypto market, I'm not going to go through the whole long lecture, but the Chinese actually need US dollars to help keep their currency stable. So the Chinese could sell gold if they can't get enough dollars, or they could sell Bitcoin. Like, this is a hidden risk. Like, this is a risk to the view that the Chinese, if they get into a bad spot, could have to sell gold or crypto. Chinese have a lot of gold, right? So, again, there's scary stuff out there that doesn't really have anything to do with winter. The negative risks are all geopolitical. But the reality is the bond market's frozen, and there's going to have to be a massive Fed liquidity push that has nothing to do with interest rates, right? Matter of fact, you may hear from Jerome Powell that the next thing he may say is we have to come in and do something because the bond market has lost confidence in the administration. Okay. So this is the orange man saying he's not happy again, and the 21 truths of Bitcoin. It's an ideology, an asset, a network, a commodity, right? Digital money, digital gold, corporate, global. Okay. Now, this is all true, but if this is the case for Bitcoin right this second, we're in trouble. Okay. The case for Bitcoin is that it's the only money that's outside the system, because every system, the US system, Japanese system, the Chinese system, it's kind of broken right now. It's kind of broken. This is the only thing that's not broken. Now, to me, that doesn't mean winter. That could mean volatility, but it doesn't mean winter, because winter is just, it's dead and it's never coming back and it's over. And I don't think that that's true, particularly when you look at the AI narrative and the liquidity that has to be coming, or the common sense that has to be coming. I mean, if they do something stupid and there's a negative reaction, markets have a funny way of correcting what politicians want to do. Okay. Arizona passing these bills. If you have a circus in Washington or China, these states or these corporations may go, uh-oh. And again, you've got this conference in Vegas, right? If anybody was going to make big announcements, this includes our government, they would do it at that conference. Okay, some unbelievable stuff going on here. Silicon Valley, Web 2. Supposedly, Google is selling AI technology when, everybody says, okay, well, we're not going to have Skynet. We're not going to have all these terrible AI weapons. Well, guess what? Google's now in the defense business selling stuff to Lockheed Martin, right? And a lot of this stuff is being used in the Middle East, just in case you think Web 2 is on your side. Think again. They're on the side of their shareholders. They're also on the side of anything that helps them become, for lack of a better term, the gods of AI. That's what this is all really about. All of these tech companies, they want to invent Skynet. Now, the Italian prime minister, if you'd like to hear something, Italian or Roman on Easter, can we make the West great again? Can we all get along? Let's all get along. This stuff where you have to pray to the higher power of your understanding, that's a good idea to do regularly. But I haven't seen or felt this much concern really since cough, cold, and flu. Now, this individual, for the saying, make the West great again, and her, the general Italian look thing that she has going on, frankly, if I may say so, is a welcome reprieve from all this otherwise worrying. Hey, Pump.Fun. Remember these guys? The team or employees will launch no tokens. That's good. And experiments at the social media, the social tokenization edge will continue. Okay. So again, Pump.Fun, it's almost like, remember the good old days where, people were doing stupid things to promote their token. Now, if you do have winter, this is why you have winter, because that got out of control, right? Just like the ICO thing got out of control in 2018. Crypto does have a self-installed mechanism to blow itself up. Now, the great news is the next time crypto goes up, it may go up for epically serious reasons. And of course, fun reasons too, because I think AI agents are going to be issuing coins, right? I can't believe AI agents, even if they're clumsy this year, as you head into, say, the fall, the AI crypto narrative takes off again. And when it takes off, it's for real. This was just an experiment of what can you have if you have a mania? Just a mania. And that's why it feels like winter, because the mania ended. But the investment themes in the space are still there, right? Dormant crypto wallet acquires ETH. 7,000 Ethereum. I mean, I know I say this every show, but Ethereum is an open, is like this giant open door to run finance on ETH. And if you look at what's going on in the bond market, when you look at this, okay, the liquidity in the system is breaking down day by day. This is why the guy from BlackRock wants tokenized assets. The next rally in crypto will be for serious investing reasons, which is why I think talking about winter, that's not the right word. I would call it consolidation or just fear from whatever's going on in legacy. Okay, Van Eck thinks Bitcoin is going to $180,000. Okay, investors are open to it, and investors are going to need it, right? Because if they break the world's financial system, going to 20% Bitcoin, this whole 60-40 portfolio thing, that's going to go out the window. People are going to go 20% Bitcoin, 20% gold. They're going to see gold as too late because if it goes to 4,000, you're like, okay, well, the move's over. What else can we do? And they're going to see Bitcoin 25% off of its high. Okay, gold has now outperformed the S&P over the last 20 years. Okay, again, the victory lap for the gold guys. Congratulations to them. They held on for years and years and years and years. Like, I mean, they went through multiple Bitcoin cycles with gold doing nothing. And again, you are going to find out why gold is moving like this. Don't tell me it's because it's a safe haven from weird stuff. Gold's moving like this because somebody is short. Someone is short. SEC reveals crypto custody roundtable panelists. Less roundtables, more action, please. The Financial Times is reporting that many countries around the world are setting up strategic Bitcoin reserve to fast follow, right, the United States. Game theory is a beautiful thing. In other words, we got to buy it before they buy it, which, makes sense because, again, that announcement in May looms. Like, if this thing with Powell and the bond market goes south and it affects housing, you could have the orange man's approval rating completely collapsed. It's actually completely collapsed already. And the only way to come back from that is to get Bitcoin going again. And they may need Bitcoin to back treasuries, or other countries may figure this out. Like, we'll pay you a certain percentage of interest in Bitcoin. And remember, if it comes to that, governments aren't going to care what they pay. They're not going to care, because if their bond market doesn't function, if Bitcoin is a gimmick that allows their bond market to function, they're not going to care what they pay, which is a very important thing to remember when they start this whole winter thing. Like, when they start with winter, they say there's no bull case. There's no case for this thing to go up. There's definitely a case for this thing to go up. Right now, most likely what you don't have is liquidity to go up, because if the bond markets are frozen, right, and everyone's freaking out and everyone's holding on to money and no one's investing, that's why Bitcoin can't move. But of course, that has to change, or it has to change. They can't allow that. They're definitely coming in at some point. It's either going to be the Fed or the Treasury with their form of QE. Okay, a real estate firm bought a bunch of Solana, right? Stable coins, real world assets. These things will run on these big networks. And if there's a liquidity crisis and people can't buy and sell things, you're going to be shocked at how fast BlackRock can push a button and make these type of things happen, right? Honestly, explaining meme coins and why the joke-inspired cryptocurrencies often crash. Wow, that's a little late. It's a little late for that article, don't you think? It's like, oh, it's crypto winter. Oh, meme coins went to zero. Bro, where have you guys been? Right? I mean, to me, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, thank God, this is bullish. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go buy Bobcat. Let's do something. You know what I'm saying? Like, Left Wing News Network says, oh, crypto crashes. I mean, can you believe it? I don't know. I don't know. It never ceases to amaze me. Okay, Van Eck wants to track crypto stocks. Galaxy Digital doing a little interesting thing, diversifying away from Bitcoin mining and into AI data centers, right? I continue to believe crypto equities as the only organic source of Bitcoin that can actually collect them all at once. I think this is a really great idea, because if you ever had Bitcoin at 250 or 370 or all these big upside targets, because it becomes, a $3 or $4 trillion asset class, these Bitcoin miners, they're going to be worth a lot of money. Bitcoin hash rate hits all-time high, right? This is very bullish too. Galaxy Digital puts a proposal together, right, to reduce Solana inflation, because, people are starting to figure out that all your free trading on Solana isn't free. They pay the validators in Solana, and then they go in the market and dump the Solana to pay for your free trading. It's not free. It isn't, right? So if they don't do something to stop the Solana inflation, Solana can't go up like you think Solana should. Okay, and here are our friends after, after I just discussed it for, 35 minutes. Coinbase warns of new winter as market turns bearish. Coinbase warned that deteriorating sentiment may usher in a new bear cycle, but remains cautiously optimistic about a potential rebound later. Okay. So, you know, the point that we have to get this circus, this political circus has to end. I don't know that it has to necessarily be, the summer. Normally when crypto goes crazy, it's the fall. So if you're going to be honest about when things can go banana zone again, you might say the fall, right? I continue to believe people are discounting what can happen at this Bitcoin conference. I'm not trying to sell you a ticket. I'm just saying that's big enough and they have to pivot. And when they're talking about winter, that's when you talk about getting long. Because I can tell you right now, when Bitcoin was at 3K, right? It was so bad in 2018. When Bitcoin was at 3K, somebody called my boss and said, it's Charlie Shrem, a news outlet, and said, what's your upside target for Bitcoin? Like 6 months from now. I told him 13,000. And he wasn't comfortable saying that to the media. And he was the guy who was telling us that if you buy Bitcoin below 10K, one day you'll be set for life. Right? So that's how bearish it was. That, you couldn't even say it's going up. That's what crypto winter really is. It's a complete, it's a wasteland. When you say crypto winter, you might as well say crypto Mad Max. I don't know that this is crypto Mad Max, even though stuff is way off of its high, because there's a thesis for it to not only go up, but go up massively. We're just waiting for governments to get done screwing up. Every recession, every problem, doesn't matter whether you like the politicians or you don't. Every economic problem that there's ever had in human history can be traced back to what they call policy error. And there's so much policy error these days, it makes the case for crypto. So on tariffs, we're taking in a lot of money, which we've never done before. We're going to end up with a baseline of a substantial number. Actually, no, you're not. Money is not coming in off this. It's not. Just like they didn't save any money off Doge. And for our friends in Switzerland, they're accepting Bitcoin payments at supermarkets. You know what? If I had to leave the great state of Texas, I would want to go to Switzerland. I want to see Switzerland and Japan before it's all said and done for me. Okay. This woman actually survived this fall. So if you think your P&L is bad and you're having a bad day, this woman in Russia fell out of a 6-story window and lived. Bless her heart. An Easter miracle for her. China halts all liquefied natural gas production. Okay. So here's one of the things that we're focusing on. This is the yield on the 10-year note. We do not want to see this go up. We just don't. Okay. This is when interest rates went down because everyone freaked about stocks. And then this is when interest rate went up because everyone freaked out about bonds. Okay. This may be a little bit easier to understand. It's ZB. This is the price of the long bond. So, bonds down. You can just in your mind think that that's higher rates. You don't have to watch interest rates, but ZB has got some substantial resistance here. And the 30-year bond is the confidence metric in governments. Okay. You also have to be at least cognizant of the fact that over Easter, right? I'm just going to put the US ETF up. Over Easter, Asia doesn't do Good Friday. Asia doesn't do, that like Monday after Easter, I believe, the way Europe does it. They don't do any of that. So, Americans, Western people will be, I don't know why I can't get this. I'm looking for something about Chinese stocks, right? Okay. Remember, there's no Easter over there. Okay. This is the Chinese stock market, the ETF in the United States. It's called A share. Okay. You go down, you hit the discount zone, you rip back up here. There's a lot of Lux Algo resistance here. And, like our Sunday night, their Monday, there could be some rock and roll. Could be our bond market, could be their stock market. Okay. I don't think it's crypto winter. I think there's an incredible case to buy crypto. I also think there's an incredible amount of fear, right? It's just fear is really high in legacy. Now, the thing that makes fear go away is liquidity. Bessent will have to come in. Powell will have to quit. Something will happen because they cannot have global bond markets. Like the Japanese market, our market, you cannot have these markets locked up without somebody having to come in and flood the markets with money. They have to get that done. So the case for crypto is there. Is there a little bit of a case to worry over this weekend? Yeah, maybe. But you know what? I got a better idea. Really. Crypto is always a crisis, right? Like, oh, it's World War III. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. There's always something. You know what? Manage your stop losses. Manage your positions. Make sure you have Bitcoin. And you know what, folks? Pray to the God of your understanding, just as a general idea. Enjoy Easter or Passover with your family. Hug your wife, hug your kid, hug your husband, hug your significant other, call your mom, right? There's more to life than worrying about all this stuff. And at the end of the day, you should enjoy being a human being because crypto is about human freedom. And what good is human freedom if you don't enjoy it? That's my advice to you. That's my advice to myself. So on behalf of Eagle King and Toby, please have a happy Easter and have a happy Passover, and we will see you next week.